Gin does games!
Hello ladies and gentlemen, Gin here with another League of Legends Champion Guide. Have you ever wanted to play drunk? That is, not you drunk, but a drunk. How about a drunkard who's drunk so much that he's gained booze superpowers? Then Gragas, the rabble-rouser, is the champion for you. Join me now and let's learn how to Gragas. Gragas is a portly, ability power-based mage fighter. He excels at area of effect burst damage, crowd control, and long-form sustain. He has both long-ranged poke and up-close brawling potential. To offset his well-rounded figure, he has some very difficult skill shots to land, not only for their distance and speed, but for their effect as well. You can usually find him in the middle lane, but he does well in the top too, and can even jungle in a pitch, albeit oddly. Gragas' passive is Happy Hour. His magical booze does a body good. Whenever he uses one of his abilities, Gragas takes a swig and restores 2% of his maximum health over the next 4 seconds. This effect doesn't stack, only resetting if you use a new ability. So, if you want to get the full effect of Happy Hour, you'll need to space your abilities out. Though it doesn't make too much of a difference in short fights, it certainly helps. Where it shines is in the laning phase and over long poking engagements, allowing the big brawler to trade repeatedly, much more than many of his frailer opponents. Speaking of poking, the rabble-rouser's Q is Barrel Roll. He takes one of his big kegs and sends it tumbling toward a location of your choice. After 5 seconds, it explodes, dealing magic damage and slowing the attack speed of nearby enemies for 3 seconds. And of course it slows attack speed. After all, how well do you fight while drunk? While it's sitting there, you can activate the ability again to have it explode early. You can also push the button again while the barrel is still traveling to have it explode immediately upon arrival. Barrel Roll is Gragas' main source of ranged poke, which is strange because the barrel rolls quite slowly. This requires that you become quite good at leading your target. That also means that getting up close and personal makes it much easier to hit with for a huge burst all at once. It's also fantastic at clearing waves of minions. With just a little bit of ability power, it can clear a wave's caster minions. With a lot of AP, he can clear whole waves with ease. Since it can sit around for 5 seconds, it's also useful as a zoning tool, deterring your enemies from approaching a certain area, keeping them from last hitting, or perhaps attacking a weakened ally. For all these reasons, we will take a point in Barrel Roll at level 1 and max it out first. Gragas' W is called Drunken Rage. It allows you to play the Gragas drinking game. Take a drink and push the button every time it comes off cooldown. By the end of the game, you'll be smashed, and so will the enemy nexus. When you activate the ability, you gain some mana and begin a 1-second channel. The ability costs no mana to cast, by the way, cause that'd be weird. If the channel is completed, Gragas gains that amount of mana again and becomes empowered for the next 20 seconds. Massively increasing his attack damage and reducing all incoming damage to him by a hefty percentage. With just 20% cooldown reduction, Gragas can activate this ability every time it comes off cooldown and have the buff basically permanently. Be careful when and where you use the ability though. If you cancel the channel, or if an enemy silences or stuns you or does anything else that can stop it, you won't get the buff, nor the extra mana. Using other abilities or trying to move will also cancel the ability, so be careful. Drunken Rage is really strong for Gragas' sustain, both in and out of combat, as well as in combination with Gragas' next ability. For all these reasons, we'll take a point in Drunken Rage at level 3 and max it out second. Our stout brawler's E is Body Slam. Just as you might expect, the fat drunkard charges forward, slamming himself into the first enemy he encounters. When he does, he deals magic damage to that enemy and all enemies around it, as well as slowing them for a few seconds. The damage that Body Slam does scales not only with ability power, but with attack damage as well, making it work even better within a Drunken Rage. With the two combined and a short-ranged barrel roll to follow, Gragas can deal quite a bit of surprise burst damage. A few quick exchanges like that in lane and first blood can be yours easily. Body Slam only collides with enemies. That is to say, you can use it to dash across walls and barriers of all sorts. How a fat man passes through a solid wall is beyond me, but hey, magic booze, whatever. To offset this surprising and awesome mobility, Body Slam has a somewhat long cooldown that is halved should he hit an enemy with it. For closing distances, the slow, getting the last hit on some minions, and of course the mobility, take a point in this at level 2 and max it out last. Gragas' ultimate is powerful and difficult to use. Ever heard of a Molotov cocktail? Try that, but barrel-sized. The Rebel Rouser tosses a heavy, explosive cask to a target area, dealing massive damage and knocking all enemies a set distance away from the center of the explosion, as well as briefly giving vision of the area. The damage portion of the ability can of course be used in conjunction with his other abilities to quickly burst down a target, but it's the knockback portion that sets Gragas apart. A good ultimate can make or break a team fight, as it can knock them both towards him and away depending on its positioning. This is what separates a good Gragas player from a bad one. We'll talk about this more later, but for now, know that you should simply take a point in it every chance you can. For runes, I recommend magic penetration marks, flat armor seals, flat magic resistance glyphs, and movement speed quintessences. Now, calm down and listen before you yell at me for not taking any AP here. His scaling is generally pretty good, but he has some really great base damage stats, so in the early game, it should do just fine. You can always buy more later, and we'll get some from masteries anyway. The marks are standard for such casters. The rest is due really to his melee nature. Not only does he have to get in close to last hit, but Gragas does most of his damage and his best trades right up in the enemy's face. To do that, he's got to get there, and do so safely to make it worthwhile. Combine this with Drunken Rage and your passive, and the Fat Man will come out on top more often than not. As for masteries, we'll take a bit more standard approach with 2109, going all out for AP burst in the offense tree and grabbing some speed, cooldowns, and buff duration in utility. Gragas loves himself a blue buff, so no complaints here. Keeps his drinks nice and chill. Summoner spells are also pretty straightforward. Flash is an absolute must-have on Gragas. Extra mobility, dodge spells, position for barrels, and combine this with Body Slam to close gaps like nobody's business. Ignite is very strong early game, allowing him to secure some early kills and begin snowballing. It starts to deteriorate as the game goes on, of course, but it's still decent throughout. If you're facing an exceptionally troublesome bursty lane, consider taking Barrier instead, or Exhaust versus AD heavy teams. Both will likely cost you some early kills compared to Ignite, but it's better than dying. When equipping our deranged drunkard, start with a Doran's Ring for a good all-around start, or a Crystalline Flask if you need to be more defensive. For boots, we'll go with Sorcerer's Shoes, as with most mages. If you're getting ahead in lane, rush straight for a Rabadon's Death Cap. You'll want to get it eventually regardless. If, on the other hand, you're falling behind, especially if your jungler isn't keen on sharing the blue buff, work towards an Athene's Unholy Grail. Gragas needs a steady diet of mana to go along with his booze, even with Drunken Rage. The cooldown reduction is mighty welcome as well. Zhonya's Hourglass, Void Staff, and Morellonomicon are all good options to round out your belly. Your build. Not your belly. Build. If you're facing a particularly tough opponent in lane, consider grabbing a Rod of Ages early for even more sustain. Abyssal Scepter is a strong pick versus other AP opponents, especially when they start to fear your power and buy MR of their own. Rylai's Crystal Scepter adds a slow to your poke from barrel roll, and more health synergizes with your Happy Hour passive. Similarly, Spirit Visage and Warmog's Armor grant quite a lot of synergy there, while being strong defensive picks in their own right. Lastly, if there's some heavy AD on the enemy team and Zhonya's isn't cutting it, you might want to grab a Frozen Heart. Earlier, we mentioned that the barrel roll is a fairly slow-moving projectile. Therefore, the closer you are, the less likely your enemies will see it coming. To this end, we can find our harassment combo for the laning phase. Whenever possible, hit your W, as you'll be wanting to keep the Drunken Rage passive up anyway. With your increased attack damage, charge in with E whenever you find an easy opening. Now that you're right on top of them, and they're slowed, double tap your Q for tons of burst damage. Get off a basic attack or two if you'd like, and walk away, shrugging off whatever damage you might be taking, thanks to Drunken Rage, your passive, and all the armor and magic resistance we started out with. Do this a few times and a kill is easy to secure. Speaking of combos though, Q and R together can make for a simple, long-ranged burst that can take out a surprising number of targets instantly. Simply roll out your Q, toss your R, and activate Q again before the explosive cask hits. Reactivating Q before the R hits is very important, as you don't want to knock them out of the range of the spell. Explosive Cask is a very difficult spell to use. Improper use can utterly ruin a fight for your team. Remember that it knocks your enemies away from the center of the blast, so the ones on the far side will be knocked away, the ones near you will be knocked toward you, and the ones on the sides will be knocked sideways. It can't push anyone over a wall, so instead it sort of pins them to it for the duration of the normal travel time. It can be super useful in chasing a fleeing enemy to knock them back towards you, but if you aren't careful, you might just help them escape. Watch what your allies are using as well. You don't want to knock them out of your friend's skill shots. Additionally, be wary not to knock them towards your squishy teammates. It's all well and good to scatter the crowd so they can be picked apart one at a time, but if you hit the button and it drops the enemy Jax right on top of your team's Jinx who only has 200 health, you're gonna have a bad time. While Explosive Cask doesn't push people through walls, Body Slam can push you through a wall. This allows for some quick escapes and weird ways to hop across the map faster, letting you gank lanes with ease. In fact, once you hit level 6, ganking other lanes is a breeze. You have a spell to move enemies wherever you want, a nearly spammable slow, and a bunch of burst. Use it! Clear your current wave with a barrel roll and rush off to crack some heads. The only other thing to note is to be careful when aiming your body slam. It will stop whenever you hit any enemy at all, champion, monster, or minion. So be careful when chasing through a minion wave. You don't want to turn your gap closer into a dash that goes just 2 inches. Gragas is a well-rounded, beefy bar brawler. Land your barrel rolls, keep your Drunken Rage up, and knock your enemies about to lead your team to victory. So thanks for watching, everyone. If you've enjoyed this guide, please let me know by hitting the like button. Speak up in the comments below if you have advice or questions. We're all here to learn. Subscribe for future stuff like guides, gameplay, and general silliness. Follow me on Twitch for streams and Twitter and Facebook to see what else is going on. Till next time, I've been Gin, and you've been watching me talk about a video game. Now go have some fun.
Let's get this party started.
Have a drink. Hey, gather close and listen here. A tale of mead for every ear. A storm is brewing on the rift. No need to make an arcade shift. Happy hours on the rise. I'm rather drunk, that's no surprise. Raise a flask and start the air with several pints of beer. Hey! The Massey